Welcome to the Midweek Mailbag, your Detroit Lions midweek podcast where we answer your Detroit Lions questions. We are back after taking a week off and then an exclusive Pride of Detroit Direct episode. This is our first off-season midweek mailbag for 2025, and I don't like using the word off-season, considering there's
still one more game to play.
There's still two teams that aren't in off-season mode, but it is what it is. We're going to answer all your questions, and yes, it's going to involve a lot of off-season talk, which is always my favorite season to talk about. By the way, my name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the producer over at Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online. With me, as you've already heard, is the managing editor of Pride of Detroit, is the machine, is my off-season savior. Erik Schlitt is here. Erik, how are we doing, buddy?
Hey, buddy. Yeah, it's a tough transition this year. I don't know. It's hard to compare because last year was very different, but it's just a different kind of not happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It's something we have to get used to. Right. We have to get used to the fact that the Lions are going to be playing longer than we've seen in some time, and the season could end in disappointment or exuberation, depending on what happens, right? So,
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're on the wrong side of it this year, like everybody else, 30 other teams, but
Right. Teams like the Bengals, the Ravens, the Bills, they're used to this. It's a little new for us.
Yeah, so it's there's some adjustment, but we're doing our best.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, this is going to be a very off-season heavy podcast because what else is there to talk about? We're not really going to talk about the Super Bowl at all this episode, so I sense no one cares anyways, which is fine. I'm cool with that. I'm going to watch, but I'm not going to be emotionally invested. And we're going to start this podcast with kind of the talk of the entire NFL, and that is going to revolve around some trade talk. So this first question comes from one of our Pride of Detroit Direct subscribers. Brad S. says, with respect to the Garrett or Crosby type of trade, if the idea is to have a dominant pass rushing partner with Aiden, are we likely or even able to find a guy like that in the late 20s over the next 2 to 3 years? Wouldn't it be a decent option to take on a guy for a couple of years worth of first rounders, knowing that in a couple of years we will let them go and we will either have to do it again or hopefully have a later round pick that we have developed into a serviceable player replacement? Cap hit would be temporary in that case, and they could find a new deal to make the money after playing on a Super Bowl team somewhere else. Okay. Long question here. I have no idea what your thoughts are on a Myles Garrett type of trade because we haven't really talked about it. I kind of gave my thoughts on the main POD cast on Monday.
What were they? What were they? Just so to recap.
Honestly, it's that I'm a little more open to it than I would normally be with one of these big name guys, and it's with a huge caveat that I don't even know if is possible, which is I don't want to extend him. I want him for 2 years and then out because if you extend him, because I think the Lions can take on that cap hit. I see a lot of people saying like you can trade for Myles Garrett, but it's going to cost you extensions to Kirby. It's going to cost you an extension to one of these other guys. I don't think that's true. I think if you have him for 2 years and that's it, I think you can still get all the extensions done that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I'm open to it. And I think Brad brings up a relatively good point. Like you're very unlikely to find a Myles Garrett at 28 or wherever they're picking next year.
Sure.
But the trickiest part for me and the hardest part for me to get behind is the fact that the cap is going to tighten up real hard in 2 years. And that's when you want young, cheap talent. And you are taking two potentially premier players off the board with a trade like this. So it's mixed feelings, but I'm maybe more.
Yeah.
But this is the most open I've been to a big name trade where, listen, it's a position of need. The Lions can take on his salary cap for the next 2 years relatively easy. Next year is a little bit more difficult than this year. And the first round picks are just about as worse as bad as they can get. So departing with 28 and 30 or 32 or whatever is going to be a lot easier to swallow than 10 and 8 or whatever.
So I'm with you for a lot of that. I think he's a game changer, and if you have a chance to add him, you have to consider it. I do think the cost is going to be more than what people are kind of assuming.
Okay.
These ideas that it's going to be a first rounder, a third rounder, and Hendon Hooker are just
I don't think
lunacy.
I'm with you.
I do think it's going to cost multiple young picks, like 3 potentially. Like it's you're talking about Khalil Mack type of, where Mack had those 2 firsts. It's going to cost more than that. And it's like anything, inflation, it's going to go up. So it might not be a third first rounder, but it might be like another, it could be a couple
right.
third rounders or something like that, right? Like it's debatable. I do think you're going to run into an obstacle without not extending him.
Yep.
I think that is going to be the biggest hiccup in your scenario is he's going to want a deal. And if he wants a deal, you're talking about not 20 million a year, which is what you would get in a trade. But you're talking,
35.
upwards of 30, right?
Right.
Plus, yeah, you're right. 30, 35, right? So now you're talking 35. Now you're talking about you're going to run into some trickiness with extensions. I do agree, though, the biggest hindrance to this getting done is the fact that you're going to lose potentially 2 to 3 core players at a time when you're going to need them. Yeah. And I do think that's the biggest thing for me is this team is built on Brad Holmes' first and second round picks. It just that's the core of this team. You're lucky to get a 4th rounder to turn into Amon-Ra the way that it did. It's rare, but so
third.
Yeah, 3rd rounder, right? And certainly. But the giving up that kind of capital is like saying I'm cool not getting 4 starters down the road that I can cultivate for 5 years, because that's really what you're getting with these first rounders, right?
Yeah.
And so you're talking like half a decade of low cap control. And so maybe a Garrett extension doesn't cost you now because you can afford them on a lower cap, but it will cost you later when you're now having to sign free agents to fill those vacated roles that you would hopefully have developed rookies into. And so now you're paying higher amounts to those guys to try and get an equal level quality play. So for me, it's all about the money for me. Like, I think the player is worth it, but the losing the younger players or the potential younger players, and then the cost associated with that. This is a move that will have an impact on the next 5, 6, 7 years of building this franchise. And that's why it's not just, you can't just hastily make the decision. I also don't know if he is we add him and it's Super Bowl and it's a guarantee, right? Like there's still some holes.
It's never a guarantee.
Right. There's still some things that they need to fill. Right. And so there's a lot of appeal, and you could talk me into this. If you can say, hey, I can get it. It's only going to cost you 2 first rounders. And like you said, if it's 20 or 28 and 32, all right, I can get away with it a little bit more. But if it's starting to get into like 3 and 4 players, now it's getting a bit too much for long-term stability, financial stability. And I also don't think you can get away with without extending him. I think that's going to be part of the deal.
I have one comment and then one more question for you on this. The comment being what's not being talked about enough, which is this puts the Browns in salary cap hell if they do it.
Yeah. And like they have to cut players.
They have to cut starters just to clear the space to trade him. And their general manager has, done everything he's he can to make it clear that he has no interest in trading Myles Garrett. So I think that needs to be underlined, italicized, bolded. I still don't think this happens at all. I don't like. Yeah. I think this is Myles. I don't think Myles Garrett is trying to work his way into a new deal in Cleveland, but I think that might be how this ends, because there's no motivation for Cleveland, even if you were to look at this as an opportunity to hit the reset button, and the Browns could probably benefit from doing that, right? Like hitting the reset on this whole regime, this whole era that has been a disaster since they made the big quarterback trade.
Sure.
Makes sense to do that, but they have to nuke the entire roster just to get it done. And I don't think that's the kind of thing that any franchise is interested in doing.
I think what people don't recognize is that the Browns are $30 million over the cap right now. Right now in 2025. Yes. So we're talking like a Saints type situation,
right?
Where if you trade him, you're now adding you're talking another 30 or 40, whatever. I'll look it up real fast so we're not speaking out of turn.
Yeah.
But it's another 36 million. So now there's 66 million over the cap that they have to somehow start making cuts and adjustments. And then once they get even, and to get even, you're going to have to do what the Saints are doing, which is start extending guys and then reworking contracts that you don't want. You're going to start losing players that you don't want to resign. So in order for them to take on that burden,
that cap,
you're going to have to give them 4 guys. You're going to have.
That's why the price is higher.
Them a ton. That's exactly why I say the price is. Everybody thinks the price is going to be this, and I think for a GM that doesn't want to trade the guy, and to go into cap, massive cap problems, and the fallout from that, he's going to want the moon.
Yeah.
So,
the other question I have for you is kind of the crux of this entire debate, which is people say, I don't care about 2018. I don't care about 2028. I don't care about 2029. Let's make a Super Bowl run now before all these big cap hits happen, while Jared Goff is still in his prime. Let's just go for it now, rather than these kind of half measures of, well, our roster is good enough, but we don't have this one guy. What's your response to people who think that way?
I think Brad Holmes wants to win a Super Bowl, and Dan Campbell wants to win a Super Bowl, but they also want to be employed for the next decade. and winning a Super Bowl does not guarantee that. Just look at Philly.
Yeah.
Right? Look at all the guys. Look at that Philly regime where they go to the Super Bowl and they lose in the Super Bowl, and then they lose their coordinators, and then that whole regime crumbles. The head coach is off to new frontiers and new teams, and now he's fired again, or is he even? I forget, right? And then the offensive coordinator Frank Wright, which was his guru, he's gone. Right. He's not in the NFL. Their whole regime is out of the NFL, I think, except for their defensive coordinator. So just doing enough to get there isn't enough to maintain your job. If you build the roster and you keep it competitive for the long term, you're going to keep your job long term. If the Lions make the playoffs, keep making the playoffs, Brad Holmes isn't going anywhere. Dan Campbell's not going anywhere. This is not a Jim Caldwell situation where they're going to say 11-4 is not enough, or 11-6 or whatever. They're going to be okay, we're in it. So I don't think they're going to feel pressed to try and win it, because I think there's some self-preservation.
Yes, but I'm saying from your point of view, as a fan point of view, do you want them to go all in and make a big move like this and go for a Super Bowl, even if it threatens the 2028 team, the 2029 team? Because you're right, obviously general managers and head coaches, whether they're going to admit it or not, are working on a level of self-preservation. No doubt about it. But at the same time, if they bring a Super Bowl to Detroit, that's going to buy them at least 5 more years.
Oh, certainly. It's a different scenario in Philly versus Detroit.
Yes.
But again, I've gone on record. Probably said this 7 years ago. I want the Lions to be a long-term contender more than I want anything else. And I want them to have 10 bites at the apple rather than just one, right? Because if you get that one bite at the apple and you don't make it, we're back into exiting the early or maybe not making the playoffs if you blow your team up and take your shot and don't get it.
Right.
I would rather have – I have enough confidence in this regime and the players that are under contract currently and the direction that they're headed that I want them to be consistently competitive, consistently in the playoffs, and have multiple chances, because crazy things happen in the playoffs and a couple things fall their way and they can make it without having to make a big move. And that's what I would prefer. I want the long-term stability.
I'm with you, and I think it's because I view a Super Bowl window as this: having a roster good enough to win the Super Bowl, period.
Yeah.
Did the Lions have a roster this year good enough to win the Super Bowl? I think the answer is undoubtedly yes.
Right.
Will they this year without Myles Garrett? I think the answer is still undoubtedly yes. They're not losing enough pieces for me to believe that the Lions are not going to still have a legitimate chance at a Super Bowl. So once you're past that threshold, whether you do or don't win the Super Bowl is largely dependent on luck. And I know a lot of people won't agree with me on that, but it's damn true. It's luck in the middle of these coin flip games, whether your kicker misses or makes a kick or a fumble bounces your way or not. It's luck in terms of whether your roster stays healthy or not, because the Lions were certainly on the bad end of luck there. It's luck in winning one-score games during the regular season. It's luck in what division you are in and how healthy those teams are. There's so much luck, in my opinion, dependent on whether a team that's worthy of winning the Super Bowl ends up doing it, that if you are just crossed that threshold of you have a good enough roster to win the Super Bowl, then stay in that and live in it for as long as you can. Because then, you're, like you said, you're going to have as many bites of the apple as you can. And I don't see that changing, the Lions crossing that threshold, as long as they keep doing what they've been doing. That doesn't mean don't get aggressive here and there. I mean, they traded 2 third-round picks last year to get players, right? They got Carlton Davis. They got Zadarius Smith. You can make a free agency splash or two. But a move like this is very risky. Very risky, because you're already past that threshold of winning a Super Bowl or having a Super Bowl winning roster. You're elevating it. You're getting closer to that goal, but there's still that thing, that level of luck that you can't penetrate no matter how many guys you throw on the roster. Like, you need to get luck to win the Super Bowl. And to me, that makes this a very tricky move. Not to justify. I think we can all justify it. I think you and I would both agree that we'd go crazy happy if it happened, just because it's exciting. Sure. But it's just like the level of risk to me might not be worth it. It's very much a toss-up for me, though.
I want to add one more thing to put a bow on this. Everyone wants to always cite the Rams as making the trade for Matthew Stafford as being the one person away for that helped them get to the Super Bowl. What people neglect to remember or include is the fact that team also acquired Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller, and Odell Beckham that same season in order to propel them to the Super Bowl. This wasn't a plug in Matthew in a way you go. They plugged in 3 other guys that were at one point probably the best players at their position in the NFL. And like, that gets glossed over so often, like in that Rams team, is that there was a big push in, but it wasn't one guy. It was like 4 or 5 guys. Yeah.
So what you're saying is you want the Lions to just go all in and grab 4 guys instead of just.
I'm saying Myles Garrett isn't. If you're going to push all in on Myles Garrett, then let's start shooting for the moon and add a couple more guys as well, and then really make sure it happens. Like, honestly, like that. If you're going to all in, then all in.
And I even point to that as, like, the Rams got pretty lucky that year. Like, if you look at their injury luck year, it was very lucky. If you remember that game against Tom Brady where they almost blew like a 20-point lead and then Stafford hit Kupp on that like huge play at the very end of the game. You look at the Super Bowl. That was a really close game against the Bengals, and they were probably lucky not to have to go against Patrick Mahomes. The one gap in Patrick Mahomes Super Bowls, they happened to find that gap. So I don't know. We look at that trade a lot differently if they don't win that Super Bowl, because they did have a rebuilding period. And as much as you want to say, well, they're back in the conversation, they're not a Super Bowl team. They haven't been a Super Bowl team since that year. And they could be very well entering Matthew Stafford's final year. And then what happens after that?
Right. Now you're making adjustments at the most pivotal position in the whole of football.
But people say, and understandably so, they got their Super Bowl, and that's all that matters. And I get it. That's all that Lions fans, like the majority of Lions fans, want a Super Bowl. That's it. They don't care what happens after. They don't care what happens before. They want that one Super Bowl. And so I understand where everyone is coming from in like, let's just try it. Let's just get it done this year and see what we can do. Mm-hmm. I almost feel like if you had that attitude, maybe you should have had it last year when all the coaching staff was still together. But there were some people that said, throw everything at Max Crosby, right? Throw Jahmyr Gibbs and 3 first-round picks or whatever it was. Anyways, I think it's time to move on.
Thanks, Tannenbaum.
Yeah. We were going to answer a question from Brad Thompson, who asked, how much would a Myles Garrett trade affect their signing of their own free agents in the next couple of years? I think we kind of answered that. So we're going to move on from that. Our next question is also going to come from Pride Detroit Direct subscriber Hudson, who asks, actually, it's not technically a question, but let's run down his kind of scenario here. It says, when I look at the 2025 draft picks and the Lions' first-round pick at 28, I see a golden opportunity to trade down from that pick with a quarterback-needy team looking for a fifth-year option, maybe, for extra picks on day 2 or 3. That would be the sweet spot to restock the defense with quality talent. The idea that plugging in a rookie edge with pick 28 to quote-unquote fix the Lions' defensive line doesn't make sense to me, and I think Derek Barnes and Carlton Davis might be playing for another team like the Jets next year, which means you are going to need a lot of new bodies on the defensive side of the ball. So, what's your thoughts on maybe an edge defender that would be available at 28, and if it's worth that, or if it is maybe more worthwhile to stock up on some day 2 picks and just attack the defense?
I do think you're going to always have the option to trade back when you're picking at 25 back, right? From 25, 26 back, you're always in a really good spot to potentially trade back. And I think as we saw with the Jahmyr, Branch, Laporta, Campbell class, trading back has massive benefits, right? Sure. Like especially if you're if just in the volume of resources that you can acquire, not just adding those guys, but like they were able to put themselves in really good spots in that draft class. So I'm all about that opportunity to trade back. I don't think you need to pick a player at 28 if the opportunity is there. So I'm very much open to that. I do think, like most edge classes, this is you're starting to see more depth in them, but as we've kind of always pointed out, the higher edge players typically do better, and the longer you wait to take an edge player, the lower the chances of that player being successful. I mean, the bell curve on successful edge rushers is like a perfect swipe, right? Yeah. Like it's perfect. And I wrote an article on like the value when they drafted Aiden that year, because remember Kyle Hamilton was in that class and everybody loved Kyle Hamilton. I wrote an article talking about the difference between when you take an edge rusher versus when you take a safety and the hit rate and stuff like that. And basically the scenario I came up with was, outside of Max Crosby, all the premier pass rushers at that time were first rounders, I think, except for Max Crosby and Trey Hendrickson. Everybody else was a first round pick. Yeah. So And you could tell the better ones were the higher first round picks as well. So I absolutely think taking a guy at 28 doesn't necessarily guarantee you that pass rusher is going to be impactful. But at the same time, you can still find a guy that can occupy offensive linemen, and then you cut loose your potential defensive player of the year on the other side too, right? So I'm all about trading back. I do think there's value in picking a guy at 28. What was the third part of that question or that statement?
I think
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay with sitting there and picking. I'm okay with trading back. I think there's value, but I also think if you have an opportunity to trade up and get an edge rusher, like, great. I think the earlier you can get those guys, the higher the success rate is.
Yeah, I think the only potential counter example, and it's still early in the guy's career, is the Vikings trading him for Dallas Turner last year, right? He turned out to not be so great his rookie season, but I think that's still very much a wait and see.
Usage. Yeah, that was usage, though, too. Right. They also acquired those two guys in free agency, right?
And they were balling out, so...
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not like that's an easy, simple defense to learn right away, so we'll see with him. But yeah, like, now that you even say that, like, that kind of is a little bit more... As Mr. Trade Down, trading up to get a better edge in a what some people seem to think is a pretty good first round of edge talent, that's kind of appealing to me, because I do feel like I think part of the reason why people are so enamored with Myles Garrett is because the Lions have a big opening on the other side, right? They tried to fill it last year with Marcus Davenport. They were hoping Josh Pascal would maybe take that year 3 jump, and he didn't mostly. I mean, I think he's still a valuable player that they're going to want rotationally, but I don't think he's grown into that starter yet.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, if you shore up a pass rush, that tends to trickle down to the rest of the defense pretty well.
Right.
Suddenly you're not as concerned about potentially losing out on Carlton Davis if you do. Suddenly you're not that concerned about the depth at safety beyond your 2 starters. Maybe that means letting Iffy go as well. But I'm always down to trade down too. I'm always like, there are other needs, right? It's not just edge. It is you're going to need some corner depth. You're going to need some safety depth. You're going to need an offensive lineman at some point here. You're going to need a wide receiver at some point. So, the Lions are a pretty well-built team, but this time of year, everything looks thin, right? There's not a lot of depth at any position because you only got, 60 players signed right now or whatever it is. So,
right.
I don't know. I don't know the players well enough at this point in the offseason to tell you whether there's a specific guy I'd want them to trade up for or what.
It depends on what type of guy you're looking for. Like, do you think that they're going to maintain the Aaron Glenn scheme where you're looking for a bigger body edge? Because there's a couple of those guys. Or do you think they're going to be looking for a more pure pass rusher? Because there's one of those guys, there's a couple of those guys as well. Or I mean, like, what type of guy do you think they're going to value? Because I mean, look, there's 2 Texas A&M edge rushers that are both 280. You know what I mean? Like, they're gonna fit that some big anchor role, right? And then there's also Mike Green is like 251. He's basically like a better version of James Houston. Like, he's going to be sitting there. Is that the type of guy that you want to bring in? Is it possible that maybe you want to wait and see? Maybe one of the Ohio State guys, or Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Like, he's another bigger fits the role. Like, a couple of these guys that are considered like second rounders, they're they fit the kind of grit, but you're not going to get the explosion, right? You're not going to get the pure pass rusher. Is that what they want? Do they want a more gritty defensive end, or do they want a guy who's just going to come like a tear off the it's hard to say. Like, I really don't know how Shep is going to alter it. And I do think the front could see some twists this year. And so it's hard for me to even project what style of defensive end they might even target. So
yeah,
it's an interesting debate. I don't think we really have a definitive answer for.
Of course not. And hopefully we get to talk to Shep Down at the NFL Combine at the end of the month, because that's usually when we get to talk to some coaches, particularly new ones. Not that Shep is new, but obviously new role. But we might get some clarity on what they're looking for, what they're trying to build. Maybe he's going to say something to the matter of, it depends on who we have. And then we discuss what the scheme is going to look like. And knowing Shep, that's probably what he's going to say. So, all right, let's fit one more in here before we go to break. And it's one we've kind of talked around a little bit. From Z Gaskin on Twitter asks, with the cap going to get tighter with guys getting extensions, how much more important does the draft become, and do you think they will start to try and move in the draft to stock up on draft picks? So again, like a trade down-ish kind of opportunity here. We talked a little bit about it with the Myles Garrett talk. Cap is going to tighten up a little bit. Yes, the cap is going to go up, and we don't know by how much. It'll change every year, and maybe something unforeseen happens and it goes up a lot more, or maybe it doesn't go up as much. But either way, the belt is tightening with all these extensions hitting their kind of cap max. And then there are more extensions that are going to come this offseason, more extensions that are going to come the year after. So do you see that as being kind of their other strategy? If they don't go with a Myles Garrett, maybe they go in the opposite direction of let's stock up on picks.
I think Brad is always he's always looking to acquire talent. At the same time, I do wonder how many rookies would find contributing roles on the roster as it sits now before free agency.
Right.
So if you're going to stock up on picks, we may start seeing him stock up on picks in future years as well, because he likes to use He likes to use draft picks as capital in order to move up to get guys that he wants, like with Arion last year. So I do think he will always be looking to acquire as much draft capital as possible. But I think the strategy that he put in place kind of last year with if you're a first rounder, you're going to probably play a key role. If you're a second rounder, you're going to compete. If you're a third rounder, you might just be a role player at this point. I think that strategy, if you maintain your first 3 picks from here on out, you can keep that strategy going to keep the roster flush of talent. And the reason I say this is because if you look at the other teams that have had sustainable success, that's kind of what they've done. Right, Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore is kind of like the pinnacle. He's shown you the way on how to build a sustainable, competitive roster, and he's never done it by being super fancy. He'll make trades up if he needs to, but a lot of times he just sits there and takes the best guy, and it works out great. And the Lions are getting to a spot, and they may even be at that spot this year, where they can just sit and acquire. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know if that's in Brad's nature, but I think they're in that. They have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something with last year's draft class, and I know a lot of people look at it as maybe disappointing compared to the previous draft classes, but part of that is where the roster is now. Part of that is where those draft picks were compared to previous years. But I think the important part of it too is that while you're not maybe getting top end starters like you were years before, you are continuing to build out that depth. You are continuing to have players that can step in and play after 1 or 2 years of development. So Colby Sorsdal, Giovanni Manu, Broderick Martin, those guys haven't played a lot yet, but they are part of your depth that you are going to have to rely on at some point. Right? They're part of your 53. They're part of your 69 when it comes to your practice squad. And Dan Campbell talks about it all the time. If you're on the 69, you are going to play at some point. It might not be this year. It might be next year. It might be the year after that. But you are going to be part of who we are. And it's important to have those guys under your system for a couple of years before you eventually have to rely on them so that they're ready, so that you have this developed trust in them. And so, I get the impatience. I myself kind of criticized last year's draft class because it is risky, right? It's not just building out your depth. It's building your depth with these highly developmental guys that may or may not pan out.
I was going to say, side note, they used 87 players last year. So 69 are on the practice squad, but when you start throwing guys on IR and then so they used 87 guys they used last year. Oof. And so when you look at they're going to need depth. Yep. They absolutely need depth. I also am of full belief that I'm not going to judge a player until year 3,
Right.
because we've seen so many of these guys that all of a sudden in year 3 become contributors.
Yep.
Derek Barnes, Iffy, right? Like, so for Sorsdal and Broderick, like this is their time. If they don't evolve this year, then we'll move on, and and they'll move on from them, and they'll figure out what they did wrong or what they didn't do, what parts of what they were identifying, or why didn't they develop these guys? Why didn't they ascend the way that they were projecting? Like they'll make those evaluations or self-evaluations at the time. But we've seen so many guys just all of a sudden in year 3 just blossom. I'm not counting anybody out. And I know people want to write off Broderick and Colby and stuff like that. I get it. Like, I get it. You're not seeing it. People are already saying, like, oh, the Manu, we wasted all that. Like, I get it.
Wait.
But if Manu turns into what he could be, geez, oh, Pete's. Like,
right. Gonna look at that pick as one of the best in his.
Right.
He's gonna be right up there with like the Kirby Josephs and the Amon-Ra's, right?
So I am exercising a huge amount of patience with anybody who is not in their 3rd year yet, or even, go if they're not, even if they're going into 4 or whatever. Like I have, we've just seen it so often.
All right, we're going to take a break there. That was a big old first segment. When we come back, more of your Lions questions here on the midweek mailbag off-season episode 1. We'll be right back. All right. What's up, everybody? A lot of active conversations, which I love to see, particularly at this odd time of day. I saw some of you are in your morning commutes. Some of you may have this secretly open on a incognito tab at work. Whatever it is, appreciate you joining us on this Wednesday morning. We'll get to a bunch of your questions here, the live audience, in a minute here. A lot of healthy debate on Myles Garrett happening as well. But let me get through some alerts first real quick. Be Hoppy, thank you for the follow. Yevitz, thank you for the 41 months subscribed to us on Twitch. Appreciate you. Lions Blood, 42 months subscribed to us, says it's a new era in Lions mock drafting. Not yet. It's not even free agency. If y'all want to talk about Kupp, we can talk about Cooper Kupp as well. We don't have a question for the mailbag on the show about Cooper Kupp, so if you guys want to talk about it during the break, more than happy to. Captain James Kirk, 45 months subscribed to the channel, and all in a row, by the way, Captain James Kirk, which is impressive on its own, says trade JMO and 2 firsts, make it happen. Ooh. I don't know about that. And also, what would the Browns do with JMO?
Waste them. That's what they do with everybody.
Oh, whoops. Your Twitter is Chris Perfett. Hold on, let me fix that. Boop. But yeah, I mean, you're getting a wide receiver during a rebuild year who has one more year on his deal
with an option,
with a 5th-year option. I don't think JMO would mean much to them. And we're not even going to broach the idea of trading a certain other defensive piece for Myles Garrett, because that's just. Are
you talking about Braylon's?
I wasn't going to name names. I wasn't going to name names. I know you'll name his name in particular.
Yeah, I got no problems with that. Let's trade away. Jeez. All right.
Just so some people I wouldn't even trust with a Madden controller. Like that's the level of idiocy. No other way to put it. Your boy Maroc, 33 months, is 33 glorious months. Thanks for all you do, POD. Thanks for your patronage, Maroc. Dank Ample, 20 months, says, is there an edge in the draft you would move up to take that could be as good as Myles Garrett eventually? Is the cost to get Abdul Carter more or less than the cost to get Myles Garrett?
The cost to get Carter, because he's probably like a top 5 pick. So to go from 28 to 5, you're talking Julio Jones type trade.
Yeah,
I was referenced to. Oh, it was at least 2 firsts. It was probably like the same thing, right? So and that Julio was up to get up to 8, I think. So I think Carter,
6.
look, Carter is 6. Okay, well, I think Carter is going to be on some teams' draft boards the best player in this draft, and I know everybody's going to want to say Travis Hunter is the best player because of versatility and is wildly successful at both receiver and corner. I know there's Mason Graham supporters, but Abdul, like with Abdul Carter, when you're a premier edge rusher, there's insane value to that. So you're talking multiple firsts to go up that high, and probably more. It would probably cost more to get Carter than Garrett.
So it took so Atlanta went from 27 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
It cost them the 27th overall pick, a second round pick, a 4th round pick, and then also a 1st and 4th in the next year's draft. So if essentially, in addition to the trade swap, it costs them an additional 1st, 2nd, and 2 fourths.
It would cost more than that this year. And I don't even know if he'd be there at 6. Right?
Right.
So.
But just a baseline.
Look, I think there's other talented edge guys. McKill Williams, James Pierce, those guys are in the top 20, I'd say. Then you're talking about like Mike Green, Texas A&M guys. Those guys are potential first rounders. I think the Ohio State guys are going to be right on the outside. I talked about Landon Jackson being kind of like I think you're going to find him right in the same kind of wheelhouse as Pascal, where you're going to get him like in the mid-second round type of thing. There's a handful of guys, but like we got to see. I still have to do more work on a lot of these guys. I want to see them at the combine, get their, see movement. When you're watching a guy on film and you're watching like how they move and watching them over and over, and you're assessing them, it's sometimes difficult to compare them to another edge guy, even if you watch the edge back to back to back, because scheme adds in. So when you watch
playing
at the
against
combine,
too,
right, 100%. So at the combine, you can see it helps me differentiate between like, oh, I like this guy a little bit better because I can see apples to apples comparisons, and it helps me a little bit more, just my style of evaluation.
All right, really quick, since everyone's asking, Braylon Edwards on his network. It's not, the network that he works for. They were talking about guys who are untouchable in a theoretical Myles Garrett trade. And I think he said there were 2 or 3, and it was like Panay, Amon-Ra, and I don't know, maybe someone else. He said that he didn't think Aiden Hutchinson was one of those players, and he said he would take Myles Garrett straight up for Aiden Hutchinson, which ignores a bajillion things that make sense. Like that, cap-wise, it doesn't make sense. Youth-wise, it doesn't make sense. You're probably upgrading in talent for this year, maybe. But
he doesn't think he basically said he didn't. There's no guarantee that Aiden comes back and is the player that he was because he was injured. Okay,
he seems like the kind of guy that doesn't aggressively attack.
He's done this. He broke his leg as a junior at Michigan, and he did the same thing, and he killed
came
everybody.
back and had his best year. Yeah,
that vaulted him into the second overall pick. Like this is not new area for him. Like, okay, I'm not gonna get excited. I'm gonna.
Let's just say if you're here, probably means you're here for better discourse than that. Let's leave it at that. JT Sam, thank you for the 29 months subscribed to the channel. Felix, thank you for the follow on Twitch. JT Sam with 50 bits says, long-term sustainability also tends to involve trading some blue chip players to reload from time to time. First, do you see the Lions doing something like this in the next few years? If so, what player do you think they would be okay trading, and what player would you be okay trading? In my opinion, I am only okay with trading J-Mo, not because he is bad or anything, but wide receiver is more replaceable, and he feels like the only player tradable. So like the salient example of this would be Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs. It happens. I don't think it's a necessity necessarily. Sometimes you just let him hit free agency, right? Like sometimes Chiefs are another good example here with L'Jarius Sneed, right? A guy that just like can't pay everybody.
Didn't they franchise him though? And then with Sneed,
did they trade him?
But I don't remember.
Franchise and trade, or did they just let him go? I don't remember.
I thought they traded him, but yeah,
maybe. Either way, it's another example of just like, hey, we can't pay everybody. We have to let a guy go. It's a good point, and it might be something that this team has to face at some point. I think J-Mo, I agree, is one of those candidates if you're looking at guys like that, and I'm with you. It's not necessarily a talent thing. You nowadays you have like sometimes 3 rounds deep of guys that can contribute at wide receiver in year 1 even. So I get it. I don't know. Are there any other guys where you're just like, I'm not fully committed to that guy? He's not necessarily one of these core pieces that is a must re-sign, but is talented.
I don't know. I agree that I think receiver is the most easily replaceable position in the NFL right now because of this is something we've talked about before. The way the college game is, there's just a flood of talent coming in all the time, and so receiver is going to be, there's a big talent pool out there, so you could probably replace him.
It's impossible for me to say this now, but on brand, I would say give Gibbs your 5th-year option, and then we all know what second contracts of running backs tend to how they tend to play out in the NFL. But
yeah, but Montgomery is on his 3rd now, right?
Right. Because Saquon is on his 2nd or 3rd, and he's balling out. So that argument becomes a lot tougher, particularly when Gibbs looks like a top 3 running back in the NFL right now.
Right. I don't know. I mean, like I still think they find a way to re-sign both Joseph and Branch. I know most people think that they're not going to be able to get both. I think you can.
Yeah.
The way that the NFL is nowadays, with 5 defensive backs being, what's out there 80% of the time, like to have a guy like Branch move around and then have a ball hawk like Kirby who can anchor the middle and allow Branch to move, like that is a lethal combo, and it allows your corners to play just straight outside. And because you have these dynamic safeties, and like low key, I'm okay drafting another safety hybrid early.
Yeah.
So I think having that type of player is immensely valuable in today's NFL.
I agree, and that's kind of the point I was going to get to in today's NFL, because you don't look at a lot of teams right now and see 2 safeties that you're paying big. In fact, it wasn't just it was a year or 2 ago where people were like,
they shed everybody.
Like the safety market was terrible, right? Like Quandre Diggs couldn't find a place.
Justin Simmons.
Right. That was just last offseason, right?
Yeah. It feels like it was multiple, but it was that was last year.
Right. And it's advanced metrics people are talking about how safety is it's not a valuable position. I think that's changing with the amount of too high safety that everyone is playing, and I think if you can get a guy particularly that can play either, right, that can play in the box, that can play deep safety, that can play corner maybe in a pinch, like a Brian Branch, I think those guys are immensely valuable these days. I mean, you look at the interception leaders this year; they weren't corners,
safeties.
They were safeties.
100%. everything is shifting, and I know we've been kind of alluding to this for a while, but
Yeah.
the running backs have been under, like, they just push them down. Running backs are pointless. Blah blah blah. Pay your wide receiver ones. That's been the MO.
Yeah.
For about 5 years, and then, but everything is shifting now. Now it's running. The elite running backs are harder to find. The wide receivers are more plentiful, and it flips on defense as well. Now the safeties are going to become a lot more valuable, because to have a guy who can actually play single high is hard to find, and it gives your defense
you're putting
so
more
much
guys in the
range.
box. Yep.
100%.
Yep.
And so if you want, and your outside corners now are becoming a little bit less important if you have dynamic safeties in the middle, because now your outsides are just covering, like, on from the hashes, right?
Right.
And so when you have an elite middle linebacker and 2 elite safeties, like, you can take away that center of the field, like, you're getting ahead of the curve, because that's the direction that this is headed, because you need those safeties. You need that Mike who can then now stop the run, because now things are shifting towards teams running more because of the 2 high shells to adjust for all the receivers. And so the Lions, I think, are actually ahead of the curve on this, with Jack Campbell, with Branch and Kirby. And, like, having these guys in place are going to it allows them to run a defense that most teams cannot run, that run 45% man. Like, the other teams can't do that. So adding another slot corner, whether it's, a safety who can play slot, kind of like Iffy, or if it's just like maybe a pure corner, adding another guy like that really can complete what you want to do in the secondary, and it gives you that back 6-7 that, like, can make things tough. So, like, if they went,
I mean, that might be Ennis, though. Like, that might be the revision for Ennis.
100%. If Ennis ends up being their starting nickel, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Because he's physical, he's strong, but you lose a little bit when you have a guy like an Ennis or a Branch in the slot, because now you're asking them sometimes to guard guys that you don't match up well against. At the same time, when you're going up against teams that want to run, you can punch them in the mouth. And that's what the Lions prioritize, is that stopping the run. So it's, if you look at the safeties, a guy like Malachi Starks, to me, is arguably a top 15, maybe even top 10 player. He's the Georgia free safety. He's kind of like, he's got I'm getting the same vibe with him that I got with Branch, where he is like a top 10 type of player that if teams aren't valuing him,
right,
he could slide. And if he also all of a sudden falls into the Lions range and they took a safety in the first round and they took like a Malachi Starks, I'd jump for joy. Like, Daniel Jeremiah just put out his top 50 and he had Starks at like 33 or something like that, right? I would jump on that at 28 and just be like, cool, now we're going to run 3 safety sets all the time and good luck. Because, like, I don't know if teams have caught up to the value of like these elite safeties.
Yeah.
And Malachi is that guy this year. And so I'm not ruling him out. If he's there at like, if he is there, cool. I don't care. I'd take him. Okay. And I know
people are gonna lose their mind if that happens.
100%. But here's the thing. I'm completely altering my perception on the draft this year. Completely. Because I've looked at,
so they're not looking for grit now.
No. That's core. That's core stuff. But I looked at my coverage of the draft the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. And the first year, we talked about Panay, we talked about like quarterbacks, we talked about edge guys. Like, we knew kind of where they were going to go, and they went that direction. They got that Panay, and boom. next year. We kind of focused on Aiden. Like, we knew it was going to be that. Like, we kind of knew what it was going to be, and that's where a lot of our focus was.
It's easier when they're picking in the top 10.
100%. And then the next year, I was focused on corners, and it kind of looked like they were going in that direction, and maybe they were, but they end up. I spent a little less time talking about like tight ends, and I looked at more blocking tight ends.
Yeah.
And I looked at safeties a little bit like lower, like, and then they end up getting Laporta and Branch. I loved Jahmyr Gibbs. I loved him. Him and Bijan were elite to me, but I said, there's no way that they're going to take Gibbs. So my coverage on Gibbs, minimal. Right. It was more just like stuff I did for fun. I was like, look at this balance.
And you're about to say the same thing with Terry on this past year.
100%.
Yeah.
I have all of my coverage was like on Rakestraw and like guys that were going to be near the end. And I just barely sprinkled anything on Terrion because I'm like, there's no way Terrion's going to fall. And so this year, I think I'm not going to look at like the guys that I think are going to be projected. And I'm just going to look at guys I like. And I'm going to be like, these are guys that I like, and these are guys that are going to fit. Because a guy like Malachi Starr, like there's no reason that he should be there. And people are going to look at that and say, there's no reason they're going to take a safety. They have a Pro Bowl in an All-Pro safety. But I look at him and I'm like, man, I like his game, and boy, he would just complete the secondary like I love. And so I'm going to talk about him.
Yeah, I think that's the right mindset. Like, the mindset is, will this guy be a guy that Brad Holmes goes to sleep the night before the draft and be like, wake up the next morning and say, I got to go get that guy.
Yeah, Malachi Starks, no matter what, right?
Yeah,
like, I'm not saying it's going to be Malachi, but like Malachi's a guy that I like.
Right.
That doesn't seem like he should fit into a guy that we're covering as a Detroit Lions, entity, as a cover, media outlet. But like, I ignored Terrion. I ignored Gibbs because I thought there's no way, based on what we know from Brad. Brad's going to take the best guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm shifting how I look at this draft now.
Because there is nothing I hate more than people declaring things definitively, particularly like now. Like, oh, there's no way this guy falls to 28.
Yeah. Everything's off the table. I'm guys I like, that's who I'm talking about. Because there's so many guys that I've picked that I've liked that like have done well that I haven't talked about as much.
Yeah.
Because I don't see the fit or whatever. Like Mike Sanderstill. I loved Mike Sanderstill. And I was like, I think he can play outside. And everybody's like, oh, he's 5'9". He's a nickel. And I'm like, I can play outside. Well, guess where Washington uses him? On the outside.
Yeah.
And I know, like, it, like,
who told the Sanderstill story?
What's that?
Someone. How do you spell his name?
Sainristil.
One of the Lions coaches, it was Ben Johnson, told the story about
how he came
the scouting
in
process. Yeah. And how they really liked him. Because every single Michigan player that they brought in was like, if we were to bring someone else from Michigan, who would you want it to be? And all of them said Mike Sanderstill.
Yeah. He's a dog, man.
I always throw another R in. I always say Sanderstill. That's not his name. That's not his name.
You know who I loved in the Gibbs draft was Devin Achane, the Miami back. Mm-hmm. Like I loved. Gibbs was just a better version. I was like, but I never talked about it. I talk about Achane all the time.
Right.
I was like, oh, he's great. He's gonna be perfect, good fit for what they want. Nice compliment.
Yeah, they should have gotten him instead of Gibbs. That's what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is. Brad Holmes Brad Holmes. I thought I had his punches timed after hitting the first 2 years on what he was doing, and then he threw a couple of sneaky hooks, and he's caught me off guard, and now I'm trying to get hip to his game.
Let me ask you this,
yeah,
just for fun, and because I'm mildly trolling here. The Lions don't go H-Chain, or they don't go Gibson, they go A-Chain instead. In the third round, mind you, pick 84 compared to 12.
Yes.
Does his stat line look anything like Jahmyr Gibbs's?
Oh no. Gibbs is a different animal. He's got speed. It's not Gibbs level, and he doesn't have the acceleration, but he's like shifty, he's smart. He'd be really good complement with Montgomery. But Gibbs is he has a gear that's unreal, like Gibbs does.
Right.
Like if you remember watching him at Alabama, like just nuts. If you watched him at I posted a video at the combine where they were doing the Deuce Staley drill.
Yeah.
Over the back, back, right? And you have to like do quick feet to get over. And Gibbs' head just stayed there.
Right. He looked literally like Sonic. Like his legs are moving, but his whole upper body is just.
I compared him to a hula dancer.
Yeah.
Who just like sits there and everything else moves underneath except his upper body. He looked exactly like that. And that's elite. That's next level. And I was in awe of him. Like every time you watched him at Bama, like if he hit a crease and they didn't have the angle on him, it was 6. He was just gone. And you looked at that and you were like, holy cow, this is just a different cat. And then you add in his pass catching chops and all the, it's just, he's been even better than what I could have imagined as well.
Speaking of the combine.
Yep.
I booked my hotel yesterday. I'm happy to roll in a cot if you wanna come on down.
Let's
bring your sleeping bag.
Well, I just need to allocate someone to get my children to schools and stuff.
Come on, Chet, step up. You guys know you want Erik's in-person coverage of the NFL Combine. Go watch his kids, Chet.
Yeah, it's really just a couple of days.
I'm gonna be there No, I'm
You're
stupid.
going for the presser?
Yeah, Tuesday is
Presser's
when
probably Tuesday. That's usually when it's been.
Yeah, it's either gonna be Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right.
So I'm driving in Tuesday morning, which it's not the smartest decision, but it's also going to save me some money. And then
you got to go
Saturday.
early though.
Yeah, I'm going to probably leave at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Anyways,
well, you're leaving after the interviews and stuff are done on Saturday.
Yeah.
See, I would stay through Sunday.
You would watch the drills in person?
I would. I would.
Nah.
Man, I'm telling you, I'm telling you, when I watch them, I see things that I like. When I can see them, when I see the movement, when I see
watch it on TV.
I know.
You're gonna have a better angle on TV anyways than way up high in the rafters.
Listen, I can't hire a nanny because I have 3 kids going to 3 different schools, and I have to get them to each of my kids to those different schools. It's not just a hire a nanny to sit at home. It's a bit obscene my schedule right now. Next year, very different. But this year, I hire 3 nannies. Yes. Where do I start? Do I just do a GoFundMe for that, or what do I do?
Maybe this is a good time to promote your your off-season. What's it called?
Patreon. Oh, I'm almost done with my initial board too. By the way.
Oh. I'm going to promote it right now.
I have the majority of it set up. I have all the latest rankings from the guys that I like to include. I have gone through every position and looked at the guys that have declared and not declared and kind of removed the guys that said they were going back to school. And I'm waiting on the NFL to announce when or who's going to the combine. Hopefully that comes soon, but I'm waiting on that. And then I'm adding in some of the extras, like the depth chart needs and stuff like that. So I'm working on those things, but I'm getting there. It's almost there.
You know what? We got to do this for next Movember, but you can gift memberships to your Patreon. maybe next year we give away some Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast Patreon subscriptions.
Nice.
$5 a month. It's nothing. I got an email today or yesterday that Netflix is raising their prices again. I might just cancel that. Save some money.
So, I got that too, man.
Squid Games is overrated.
Oh.
And what am I looking forward to next with Netflix? Like maybe Stranger Things?
No. Did you like that Night Agent series?
I don't know what that is.
They just came out with that. The second season of that. They came out the second season of what was the other one that's like that, but not FBI. The Night Agent is FBI. The other one is The Recruit. I think that's the CIA one. They just came out with season 2 of that. That's
good. Another cop drama. That's what we need. There's not enough cop dramas out there.
It's more spy stuff, right? Like if you like spy, like if you like that type of stuff.
Best TV's on Apple Plus. Let's be honest.
Did you watch Silo yet?
No, but people tell me you did. That's on Apple Plus too?
I've already watched both seasons.
See, I need to watch.
Listen, it's based on the books. Okay. So they've already done season 1 and 2 are out. You can watch both seasons in their completion.
Yeah.
But 3 and 4 are being filmed right now. And I believe 3 might be done and they're working on 4. They're doing those back to back. And so then that will complete the books.
Gotcha.
And so those will be coming out and then that's it. Everything will be answered. It'll be a nice, complete little box series, 4 seasons.
And hopefully they don't try to pull a Game of Thrones thing where they're like, let's get ahead of the written material and create our own stuff.
I don't see Apple.
I don't think Apple do that, no. But like Severance is really good. I haven't dipped into the second season yet because I don't currently have Apple TV Plus, but I will. Once more episodes of Severance are out. I got it. What's the name of the Jason Segel, Harrison Ford show?
Oh, Shrinking.
I saw the first season of Shrinking. I know the second season is out. That. It's very good.
Yeah. The thing with Apple is that
it's like $16 a month.
I don't think it's that much. I think it's like 10.
I think
regardless, the thing with the Apple shows is that you really have to like pay attention to them. I feel like you can't like just put them on in the background. Like for example, like the cop shows that you were just making fun of. Like I can put those on in the background.
Right. That's not good TV though. Like you might as well have the Food Network on.
Yeah, I do that too.
I do too. Like that, I'm not disparaging the Food Network, but I'm saying like if I want to sit down and watch TV, I don't want.
Do you know my favorite series series to work with on in the background is Alone. Do you ever watch that?
No. What is that?
It's so odd. They put these people out in the wilderness and they have to basically just
like Naked and Afraid.
Yeah, but it's over a long-term thing. Like they last like 2-3 months out there, and have to build it. But there's nothing going on in the show, and you don't have to really pay attention to the dialogue because the dialogue is just it's more like just like the so like I can put that on.
Listen, I have no problem with shows like that. I'm just saying like what generally like. I use Twitch for that. Like I use live streamers just because like and it's not even like video game stuff. Like I don't care about video game play. I'm not that into video games. It's just like, oh, this is a personality I like to listen to talk for a while. That's my background noise. Or sometimes it's Food Network. Like
I have 3 genres of shows.
Say what you will about Guy Fieri.
Fall in the different categories.
I will have a marathon of diners, dive-ins, and drives on for 3 hours in the background if I want, and not feel bad about it.
Harper has found that show, and she loves it. She loves it. She's like, oh, I don't know why, but she's all about it. She's discovered Triple D, and then she's also found Mythbusters. She's like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, wait till I show you this. I'm like, I loved that show.
Yeah.
Former science teacher and everything.
Sure. What about I feel like Taskmasters also falls into that category. You know Taskmasters? Why is that
No.
so hard for me to say? It's a very enjoyable. It's like they get a bunch of comedians, and this is both a British show and a New Zealand show, and I think there's probably other offshoots as well. But they just get a bunch of comedians to do like these kind of wacky tasks. That's the entire.
Is that the one where they have to like complete the task and there's always like some weird trick?
Yes.
Like it's like, oh, you have to like
yes.
uncover everyone, and then it turns out it's like you just had to do it one time or
yes.
something ridiculous.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. That is that show, which is fun and silly, and again, like it's a brain drain. Like you can do it while you're folding clothes, you can do it while you're writing a story, whatever.
I have 3 styles of show. 1 is the background. 2 is the I can watch this if my kids are in the next room, and then I have my shows that I want to watch.
Right.
And it's unfortunately that third one is the smallest
piece of the pie. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I have a 30-minute window 2 times this week.
Yeah. I can watch one episode twice. Like I can
right.
split over 2 days.
Right.
You gotta have that background stuff, though. You gotta have the stuff that's in the background. Some people like to listen to music. Some people like to listen to us, right, Karen?
Yeah, or podcast. Yeah. I guess we're a podcast. 2 more alerts, and then we'll get to some questions. We'll talk. We haven't talked about Cooper Kupp, so I want to talk about that real quick. St. Bob, 22 months, subscribed to us on Twitch, says bummed off-season here, but pumped for POD offerings. Best of the beat. Appreciate that, St. Bob. And Katie from Michigan, 49 months, subscribed to the channel, says I don't understand Lions fans who want Cooper Kupp. We have Amon-Ra, which is a nice segue into that discussion, because Jeremy Fowler kind of threw it out there yesterday that he thinks the Lions could be interested in a trade, and threw out 3 or 4 other teams, I think, in that statement as well.
Low-hanging fruit there.
Right. I think a lot of that is that, right? It's low-hanging fruit. He spent his first 4 years with Jared Goff. The Lions are in a Super Bowl window. Here's a really good wide receiver. I think you could make it work. I'm not concerned about too much overlap with Amon-Ra.
Amon-Ra plays outside half the time.
Right.
I think it might even be this season might have been a little bit over half, if I'm not mistaken, or right about it. So you can make it work. Can't make that contract work.
Right. That's to me, that's like the non-starter there. And I understand everyone has a little bit of hope because everyone is speculating, well, the Rams will take on some of that. And they have in the past, right? They've traded guys and taken portions of those salaries before. But we're talking about $12.5 million salary and a $7.5 million roster bonus this year. $5 million of that salary is guaranteed. Not that really matters. If you're trading for him, you're going to keep him. And then next year it's almost the exact same. It's like $16 million. I don't know what. It's like $14 million salary and $6 million roster bonus. None of that is guaranteed though, so you could theoretically do it for a year and then move on. Age, injury, contract makes me think that he isn't going anywhere for more than a 6th round pick. Like, anyone willing to pay anything more than a day 3 pick is insane, in my opinion, given all those factors. And I just the Lions, that's not where the Lions need to be spending off-season resources right now. You sign back Tim Patrick for whatever, $5-6 million. That's probably on the high end. It's probably closer to 3 or 4.
He signed for minimum.
That minimum last year. He might ask for more because he's not coming off a major injury.
He might get double that. Like if he signed for 1.5, I wouldn't be shocked. Like
right.
If it's 3, that's nice, but that's good for him.
You get that done. If you want to invest in the future at wide receiver and draft someone, totally cool with that too.
Should consider it.
Yep. And then all that money that you would be spending on Kupp, whether it's $20 million or even if it's $10 million, push that to the defensive side. Well, I mean, maybe you use that exact money to say, fine, we'll keep you Zadarius Smith. Or maybe it means going out and getting Carlton Davis and signing him to a 1 or 2 more year deal. I think just in general, like, I don't understand the philosophical idea of adding Cooper Kupp.
Well, right, because you're not taking J-Mo off the field, you're not taking Amon off the field, and so the way you make your offense work is with an X, and Cooper's not going to be your X. J-Mo and Amon-Ra, they're not going to be your X. So you need the bigger guy who can go over the field and be comfortable with like 3 to 6 targets a week, and that's all he's going to get. And then it's like who gets sacrificed then to get Cooper on the field? Are you going to take J-Mo off the field to put Cooper on the field? Well, you're wasting your resources there, right?
It's probably not going to be Sam Laporta either, right? They love their tight ends.
No.
They ain't taking tight ends off the field.
No. And so they need an X. And look, they got Khalif as your 4, and I think Khalif would be the guy who would suffer the most.
Yeah.
Is you'd be putting Kupp in a part-time role and sending Khalif even further down, and that's, I don't know.
Just doesn't make sense.
You're not gonna go 4 wide anymore with the talent you have at running back. Well, with talent at running back and tight end, you're not gonna go 4 wide receivers. You're not gonna turn into the Rams. You know what I mean? Like,
you just turn Laporta into a glorified slot.
Well, then then you have that doesn't.
And then you go 4 wide.
Right, but again, then Cooper's still on the bench, right? Because
Nope.
if you have no X, you're losing your X.
Yep.
Tim Patrick goes to the bench.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, no, you don't sign him. Tim Patrick's not coming back if you get Cooper Kupp.
Laporta can be your X because he's big, right?
There you go.
Is that's how
You
that
solved
works, right? He's a big guy. You just put him there you go. Take him out of the slot where he thrives and put him at the X where he wouldn't do anything. Perfect.
Yeah. The finance of it doesn't make sense. The fit is weird. You can listen. I'm not going to say you can't get J-Mo and St. Brown and Kupp on the field at the same time. You can figure it out. But to me, it makes very, very little sense. Joshua Mercer, 57 months, says 6 Twitch babies. I'm starting a new Brady Bunch around here. Yeah, you got pretty much all the 9 boxes filled out at that point. 9? Yeah, it's 9.
I don't know what to think of Antoine Green. I feel like the team soured on him.
I would think so. I mean, they went into last year thinking he had a chance at winning a starting role and very much didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Could he make that 3rd-year jump? Like Ellie Zoinks points out, or is it La Zoinks? I don't know. That'd be great. I mean, that would surely help to get that depth in there, but I feel like they
Erik,
soured on him.
10 minutes ago you said you're not counting anybody out.
No, I'm not.
Any of the draft picks out. Don't
Right.
Don't go back on that now.
I'm not counting him out. I'm just saying I feel like they soured on him. I think if he did it, if he steps up, great. I think he's got potential. But I'm just saying that they seem like they weren't super interested.
Didn't Campbell say he was going to win the job until he got hurt? I don't know if he said that outright.
You could see him starting to fade about a week or 2 before he got hurt.
Yeah.
And then when he got hurt and put on IR, I thought, oh, this is just he's not going to make the roster type of thing. But then he stuck all season, which tells me maybe his injury was longer term than what we had originally projected. And so I'm not 100% sure how bad of an injury he actually had. I don't know for certain. So
yeah,
we'll find out at some point. Probably won't be till July, but
yeah,
we'll find out at some point.
Maybe during some off-season workouts and whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, the Pistons made a trade. That's exciting. Sixers are trading KJ Martin and 2 second-round picks to Detroit. What's the other half of that? And the Pistons will absorb Martin's... I don't know. The NBA trades are weird. They're just absorbing contracts. That's what they're doing. Is that how that works? So weird. Okay. I'm not an NBA expert. I don't know how the trades work.
Yeah, the NFL cap is complicated enough. To try
Right.
and learn another league's cap is...
No, thank you. Any other questions before we jump into the next segment here? I'd scroll up, but y'all have been so active that I don't think I can find everything. I'm going to get the shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's. I almost did. I came very close to doing so when I was in Indy for the Colts-Lions game this year, but I opted to not get it to encourage myself to go to the combine this year. I dangled that carrot in front of me, so it worked. I'm going.
I really think you're only going because Shep is the DC, and you really love Shep.
No, I will
like
say it's more
if Shep
motivated
didn't
by
get promoted, yeah. If Shep didn't get coaching, if he didn't get hired, no
No.
Indy for Jeremy.
no.
Shrimp cocktail be damned.
The one thing that I get jealous of every time I don't go to the combine is those like untelevised, unrecorded interviews that the beat gets with the new coaching staff. That happens almost every year. Is like, the Lions had who's new last year? Scotty Montgomery new last year?
Terrell
Williams was new.
And DB coach. Why am I blanking on him
Townsend,
again?
that's right.
There you go.
Yeah. And so once I realized like, oh, they're going to have an entirely new coaching staff. Yeah, I think I might want to go. I might want to go meet all these guys for the first time. Have them put a face to my name and get those interviews. Content galore. And then
It's going to be interesting because there's going to be at least, I believe, 11 coaches in new positions.
Is that right?
Either coaches that have been promoted or new
Yeah.
coaches hired.
I wonder how much of those they'll make available. Like, we'll obviously probably get Kelvin. We'll get Morton.
Shep Morton, probably.
Will we get Shaw? Will we get whoever the new tight ends coach, wide receivers coach? Like that,
Whatever that turns out to be.
Yeah. I don't know.
Will they even announce it by then? Who knows?
They may
just
not.
hold on.
Wait,
Yeah, they may
we
just
should
be
go
like,
back
"Yeah,
and
just kidding."
check the last time where they announced, like, here's our coaching staff for 2025 or 2024 last year. Coaches are doing nothing right now. From what I understand,
They're doing film stuff
some,
usually, right? Yeah.
but from what I understand, right after Brad Holmes' press conference, basically everyone in that building got like 2 weeks off, maybe 3.
February 21st.
Okay, so before 2 weeks ish. They sell St. Elmo's cocktail sauce at Costco. No need. I don't have a Costco membership, so basically the same price. 5 days of hotel. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 4 days. 4 days.
My wife asked me to go get the coffee from Costco, and she sent me up there, of course, when the membership had just expired, so I got to renew it as well.
Oh, good for you.
Sneaky.
She knew. Is that not just like a swipe the card thing, or do you have to go through a whole process?
Oh no, I paid for it right at the thing. Like it's very easy to renew. They make everything super easy, man. That's
yeah.
But my coffee ended up being a lot more expensive than I thought it would be.
Nope. I was thinking about taking that conversation in a direction, and I'm opting not to. Any other questions? How many coaching positions do we still have to fill?
6.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
No,
no.
nope. That's
5. 5. The lower one. 5. Wide receiver, tight end, assistant quarterback, assistant LB, assistant DL.
and that's assuming they continue to have assistants at all those positions, which is not necessarily going to be the case. But we're going to talk about that in the second segment here a little.
I think they would. Yeah. So 6 filled, 5 open.
Yes. And what else is left to fill for the rest of the league? Like, obviously, you have the Saints are going to have to fill out their entire coaching staff. But at this point, they might just have to retain everybody. Just like, all right, come on in, Kellen Moore. You're gonna get stuck with everybody. I'm sure he won't do that. I'm sure he's been building out his staff, but let's hope he doesn't take Scotty. I don't think he would.
I don't know. I'd be surprised.
I'd be surprised.
I do think there is a max number. I don't know what that is, though.
I have no idea if there is a max number or not.
I don't know. I don't think there's like, yeah.
Here,
like it varies because you can call people coaches, but have them under different parts of the umbrella, right? Like, for example, you can be a strength and conditioning staff, but also be considered a coach, but you kind of fall under the strength and conditioning area. And I don't know if there's caps on that. I don't know. I'm not even 100% certain because, like, if you look at some of the other teams, like coaching staffs, they have like crazy amount of like quote unquote first level like intern like like new, like they have tons of those and they count those as, so I don't know. Not 100%.
I had this idea yesterday or Monday during the podcast because their offensive coaching staff is suddenly very veteran. There's a lot of guys who've been around for a long time in this league with Johnny Moe and Shaw and even Fraley and Dan and whatever. Doesn't it seem like maybe they need like a senior defensive assistant? It's pretty young on that side, outside of the new defensive line coach.
Your DL coach has been a defensive coordinator in the league before. He's been around he's been around longer than he looks. Like, he looks young, but he's not.
Correct.
But yes, I could absolutely see them add an assistant to pair with Shepard, like a mentor, because they tend to do that. They did that with Glenn, with Dom Capers.
Right.
They did that when Ben took over with Morton. So, like, adding a veteran to work with Shep would follow that pattern. It'd make a lot of sense. I think Eberflus just got hired.
I was going to say, didn't Eberflus go somewhere?
Yeah.
Did he go to Chicago?
No.
Oh, he stayed. That's where he left.
That's where he came from.
I'm an idiot. Dallas. He went to Dallas.
Yeah,
he's Dallas's defensive coordinator.
Do we know how many compensatory picks we're going to get now and when we will see them? We're not expected to get any because of the offseason. Yeah, from the offseason moves. Those picks tend to come out after the combine. So like a week after the combine, we typically get all of those comp picks, which would include like the pick that they get for losing Glenn.
Right. So it's just expected to be that, which is at the very tail end of the third round. It's even after the other.
101 is what people are expecting it to be.
Because it goes after the free agent compensatory picks.
So the way that you can expect things to kind of play out is after the Super Bowl, there's going to be 2 weeks of just like prep and off-season stuff. Then you're going to have the combine, and then the week after the combine, you're going to get comp picks finalized, salary cap's going to get set. Teams are going to start re-signing some of their players, and then the week after that is free agency. And
Right.
so, like, it comes like the next 2.5 weeks are going to be kind of slow, and
Yeah.
then the next 3 weeks after that are just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And
And
there's
some
going to be lots of stuff coming out.
there was a question about when we might start see teams cutting players. You know, the cap casualties, and it's probably in that same week that they start re-signing players.
Yeah.
All happens like right the week or two before free agency, which is what, the second week in March.
It is March. I believe 10th is the first day that you can tamper. 12th is when it officially starts.
That sounds right.
And so, like, last year they started their re-signings the Monday after the combine. So, like, it was like right off the bat. Like, they saw what they needed, they went back home, and then they were like, all right, let's get to business.
Got it. There you go. That's things are going to pick up relatively quickly. We got maybe 2 weeks more of not a lot happening. Maybe we'll hear about some coaching signings. Maybe we won't. But other than that, it'll be relatively quiet. So
Yep. Then you're going to get about a month of just news.
yeah. Okay. I think it's time to get back in. What's your heart out? 11:45? 11:30?
30.
Okay.
30.
We should definitely get back to it then.
11:30 is the target. If I left at 11:30, I need to be in my car at 11:35.
So when you said 11:30 is your hard out, it's really more of a soft out.
Well, because technically I'm supposed to be at the school, which is about 5 minutes away, at 11:40. So, but
Fair.
if I hit the light wrong,
This is for the little?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to it. Here we go. And we are back here on the midweek mailbag, coming to you the first edition of our off-season midweek mailbag on the PODcast feed. But as always, if you want the end of the month ones, just sign up for Pride of Detroit Direct at prideofdetroit.com/subscribe. $50 a month gets you weekly opinion pieces from me during the season. You get post-game videos with me and Erik and a whole bunch of stuff. And then once we get to training camp, I guess we can start promoting that already. Daily training camp recap videos.
We
for Pride Detroit Direct subscriptions.
Our mailbag podcast, the last one, was 2.5 hours.
That's a good point. Like, we went 2.5 hours. If you
loved it too.
If you love our midweek mailbag podcast and are not a Pride of Detroit Direct subscriber, you basically missed 2.5 episodes worth last week.
Yeah, it was nuts. We just kept going. We went way off topic though. Like, we had a goal of trying to answer everyone's questions, and then the questions were really good, and so we kept diverging into other topics and other tentacles of that question. It was very it was a very good long conversation.
And one of the cool things about those episodes too is that sometimes we pull up film, like we just pull up NFL Plus, and we just like, oh, well, this is what we're talking about. You see when he does this, see when he does that. It's a visual medium, whereas if you're listening on the podcast, you're missing out. But anyways, let's get to some more questions here. Damon Schneider on Twitter asks, do you see Levi Onwuzurike and Derek Barnes taking somewhat of a team-friendly deal, or do you think Barnes would follow Glenn to the Jets?
I think both would consider following Glenn. I don't necessarily know if either will take a team-friendly deal. I also don't know if the market will be what they're hoping for, considering injury histories. With Barnes, like before the season, he was talking about maximizing the season to maximize his next contract, and his focus was all about getting himself into a position to really solidify his next step for his career, for his life, and everything. And that's totally understandable for him. So for him to get injured, that really could not have come at a worse time for him. So I don't know if his plans change, because I don't think he's going to be a top 10 linebacker in free agency this year. And so I don't expect him to get a contract that I think he might have been hoping for. which means he may end up back in Detroit, maybe on a 1-year deal to try and,
We'll prove it.
get a little redo, right?
Yeah.
With Levi, he's been healthy one season of the four. Well, he was healthy as a rookie, but he was really banged up the whole year. But I think teams are going to be hesitant to sign him. And so my expectations for Levi are that he's not going to be in the first wave of signings because teams are going to want to bring him in to do medical checks. And he'll be more kind of maybe in that second wave of interest, because that first wave is when you're signing guys before you can even talk to them and, before you can get them in the building. With Levi and his injury history, I expect teams to target him more second wave. So maybe that gives Lions an opportunity to see what's out there. It gives him an opportunity to kind of feel the market a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see how his situation plays out.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what both those guys, what their market is, what their demand is, because I feel like it could be anywhere. Like you could find a guy, a team that might be fascinated with Levi Onwuzurike,
Sure.
that maybe loved him in the draft process and thinks, hey, now that the back injury is behind him, like he's really going to hit his stride. Like maybe he goes and follows Terrell Williams, right? Like that's something to consider. I'm trying to remember where he went. Oh, New England.
Pats.
Maybe one of them follows Aaron Glenn. Like it's always important to remember those coaching connections, right?
Sure.
For what it's worth, PFF has Levi Onwuzurike projected in $8.25 million a year for 2 years. So 2 years for 16.5. Barnes, I feel like Barnes is another tricky one because I feel like he's probably proved a little bit more, maybe. Like he had a good full year last year as more of an off-ball guy, and he started to show some of the on-ball stuff this year. So there's versatility there. He's still young. There's at least a year of productivity, but at the same time, it's tough, and it feels like maybe he's only going to fit certain schemes.
Look, I think he's in the toughest spot.
Yeah.
Because there's recency bias where he didn't play, and if he's not in the top 10, you're talking about him getting $3-4 million a year.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. And that's not, I think, what he was hoping would have been. That's about half of what I think he was probably hoping for.
I think the Lions would pay more than that for him, though. I mean, you also have to consider Shep. Like Shep is going to have a little bit more sway in the room this year, right?
I don't think they'll need to, though.
It's hard to project this. I'm looking at the linebackers available this year,
especially with injuries.
You got Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bolton, Bobby Wagner, Ernest Jones. Zach Bond is not going to make it out of Philly, I imagine, but he's technically.
These are huge those guys are all going to get a lot. The attention and the money is all going to go towards those guys.
But it's interesting. Like again, it's PFF, so take it what it's worth. Like Nick Bolton's going to get huge. They say $15 million a year for him. Ernest Jones, $12 million a year. Zach Bond, $13 million a year. Everyone else is about like 7 or under.
Yeah, I think he's going to be under 5, maybe even under 4.
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion to have, and to me, these are just so hard to project, especially when you're getting a guy off an injury. So I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys were back next year. I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys are gone. The one thing I've seen some projections of Levi getting double digits, like 10, 15 million a year, and I understand like the defensive tackle market is kind of out of control right now, but I don't think you can do that with Levi. I don't think there's enough production. I don't think there's enough availability in his history where you can trust a 10 plus million. Like to me, if I were the Lions, like I'd probably draw the line at like 7 at most.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard with defensive tackles because it feels like you're paying like a exorbitant amount of money or like nothing.
Right.
There's
no in between. There's no middle road.
Not much, right? And the only time you're paying that in between is if it's like for like a veteran who's nearing like 30. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't have a good feel for Levi's and what he's going to demand.
Just and the other thing to consider here, since the question was asked, particularly with the Jets in mind, the Jets have $21 million in effective cap space according to Over the Cap, compared to the Lions 46. So the Lions are going to have a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to signing players. But it is also important to remember that Aaron Glenn is going to want his guys in the building, guys that he can trust, guys that fit what he wants the defense to look like, and more importantly, guys that fit the culture that he's trying to build over there. And certainly I would imagine Levi and Derek are both guys that fit what he wants in terms of culture. All right, next question here comes from Jeff A. Asks, how much of an impact besides the coordinators will the loss in assistants be? 7, last I knew, left. That seems like a mass exit of talent.
Yeah, I think it's situationally. You're gonna have to kind of figure it out. For example, if you're someone who was worried about JMO and him needing a mentor, he just lost 2, right? In both Randall L. and Ben Johnson. And so...
and Bridgewater.
And Bridgewater. So, you're probably a little bit worried about, like, can JMO continue to evolve the way he can, or he has. But... at linebacker, you're not as concerned because you've elevated guys at linebacker. On the defensive line, you brought it up during our PODD one that like they've had 4 different defensive line coaches in the last 4 years. So like that's a turnstile there. So you would love some stability and maybe they'll get that. Maybe they won't. So maybe they're used to it, and so it won't be a big deal. But like, I think that could be a potential problem spot, because Williams, I think, was a really good coach. So it's hard to say, but I do think there are a couple spots you can point to and say like, yeah, I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, I do like Casey Rogers. I think that's about as good of a replacement as you could get. Obviously, what they've done in Tampa for the past decade or whatever. Every time he's followed Todd Bowles, he's had kind of a line of really good defensive line players, and whether that's just he happens to find himself with a lot of talent or he's helped develop that talent is something I guess up for debate. Kind of the other areas where I would circle as maybe mildly concerning is losing JT Barrett as probably a guy who was very close to Hendon Hooker. I don't think losing JT Barrett affects Jared Goff maybe at all, to be quite honest, but if you're looking to develop that talent underneath him, like I imagine Mark Brunell probably spends most of his time with Jared Goff, which is why you have an assistant quarterbacks coach, and losing that could certainly hurt Hendon Hooker's development. Now,
at the same time, Hendon's 2 years in, so Hendon should feel pretty comfortable at this point. And we'll see.
But he's really only like a year and a half in.
Okay.
Yeah. And then other than that, like there's I mean, are you worried about Sam Laporta taking a step back? Probably not. But Steve Hyden is a loss, right? He's a guy who's well respected. He's a guy who played the game. You still have Dan Campbell there, who knows plenty about the tight end position and is certainly still going to be involved. One of the kind of most eye-opening things I think he said at the very end of the season was like, I still want to be really involved in the offense. That's my specialty. And so Sam Laporta is still going to get plenty of encouragement, coaching up, teaching from Dan Campbell. Other than that, your running backs are already fine, and you've got a really good running backs coach. Like you said, the linebackers coach are still going to have Shep in the building. Plus, Sean Dean Hamilton has been there anyways. Secondary remains unchanged. It's okay. It's not that bad. I think we'll be all right.
For what it's worth, David Shaw has coached in his history tight ends, wide receivers, and quarterbacks.
Yeah.
As well as being a head coach.
Yeah. Mostly wide receivers, but yes. He's
yes.
Yeah. Keeping along the same lines here, Lions UK NFL Thomas asks, why do some position groups have assistant coaches and others do not?
It just varies on what they want to do. Like for example, with the linebackers having that one Sam role that also adds like a pass rushing component into it, you're going to have certain linebackers that are going to need that little extra attention.
Yep.
Whereas the off-ball guys aren't. And so a guy like David Carraro he's the outside linebacker or like the assistant. He's coach. He's the guy that's going to be able to help fine tune that marriage between off ball and edge,
Yep.
right? And so sometimes you have little nuances like that. Sometimes, like with quarterback, you have one quarterback coach working with like the starter and then the other guy's working with the backups. Then there's going to be other ones where they help certain aspects of bringing guys on. Like, for example, one of the things that they used their assistant coaches for last year was roster acclimation, scheme acclimation. When they were adding new talent in,
Yes.
those coaches they tasked certain coaches with helping them install the playbook with those players to get them up to speed quickly. So it really just depends on what they're trying to accomplish and how much time the main position coach is going to be doing beyond just their specific role.
Yeah. Sometimes it's also just a numbers game, right? Like you have 12 offensive linemen on your roster. You're going to want an assistant offensive line coach.
Yeah, like 18, right? When you're in season,
right?
Or in preseason,
right? Same with defensive line, right? The Lions had a defensive line assistant, Cameron Davis, but it sounds like they're parting ways this year. Reportedly parting ways this year, so I would expect that to be another position that they fill.
You don't need an assistant tight ends coach because you only have like 3.
Right. Exactly.
You don't need an assistant running backs coach because you only have 5. Right.
Exactly.
Like, so you can get away with that, even though like Scotty is also the assistant head coach. He can do both because he has a smaller group.
And then in the secondary, you have Deshae Townsend as your secondaries coach, but Jim O'Neill, who's listed as a defensive assistant, works with the safeties. Right. Yeah. So to me, it's a matter of, like you said, like sometimes within a position group, there are different roles. So you want different positions coaching those things. Other times it's just a numbers game where it's just like, you don't need a tight end. Like you said, you don't need a tight ends coach when there's 5 in the room. You don't need a running backs coach when there's 5 in the room. But when there's a billion offensive and defensive linemen, more coaches helps. Pretty simple. Yep. Also, another question to stick with the offensive line from Thomas asks, how much should we caution Mahogany as a long-term guard solution, given that he fell in the draft on injury concerns and has been playing with a sizable knee brace? For the latter part, find me an offensive lineman that doesn't. Like, everyone has
they almost
braces.
all do now. Yeah.
The draft fall is still a little bit of a mystery right now, right? Like, I don't necessarily think it was an injury thing. I know there's all sorts of rumors, right? Like leg size or something, like one leg was longer than the other was one of the things that I heard. And injuries are certainly maybe something that was found.
There are a lot of teams that have specific parameters for what they need athletically.
Yeah.
The Patriots did that, right? Like they had this guidelines.
Yep.
Only drafted off those guidelines. That's why we made all the things that we did when they tried to install that here. Was we knew exactly the type of guy that they were targeting. And there's a lot of teams that just stick to that. And so sometimes they'll wipe guys off boards because who knows?
Right.
I don't have concerns about Mahogany. I know you have concerns about his he's only
small sample size. That's it.
Yeah.
Like my only concern about Mahogany is small sample size.
Yep. I have less concerns because he played 4-year starter at Boston College in that scheme, multiple positions. I saw him play both left and right here in Detroit at a high level in both spots. I watched him get hurt and play through it during the game. Like in person, you could see he was hurting and still going out and doing it. Like for me, he has all the intangibles.
I'm with you there. No question.
To be a starter.
Yep.
And I would feel completely comfortable if they were projecting him to be a starter. I don't think they will. I think it's a competition. He's young enough because of that small sample size. You have veteran in like Graham or whoever else you might bring in. And so you're going to pit him up, the small sample size up against the veteran, let him battle it out. That's how this team always approaches training camp.
That is 100% my hope for the offseason is that they re-sign Zeitler, lock down that right guard spot, and then let
Graham and Mahogany fight it out for
left guard. Yeah. And then you throw in a 3rd round draft pick too. Even better.
The crazy thing is because if Graham wins, people are going to be like, "Oh man." But look, if Graham plays good enough to beat Mahogany, that's great.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's because
and plus,
I
like,
think Mahogany's an ascending,
yeah,
right?
and you're in a good situation in that scenario. If Graham gets hurt, if Frank gets hurt, if Zeitler gets hurt, like you have
And they
that,
do.
yeah,
You're
have
going to get hurt. They
filling.
always do.
Right. Someone's going to get rolled up on some point because it happens every freaking game.
Yes.
All right. Next question here from Elliot Battle asks, did the Lions going 15-2 distract fans from seeing this was the year from hell with injuries, an entire defensive line rotation, most of the linebacking core, and its best cornerback missed significant time? Does the fact that they were still a 1 seed prove Brad built the roster correctly?
I would say this is proof of concept of what Brad has been saying in that depth. You need depth to win.
Yes.
And the fact that they were able to coach to overcome those odds combined with Brad's we need depth. Those two combination of things are why they were able to sustain as long as they did and still keep winning down the stretch, really when they shouldn't.
Right.
When everything pointed against them being able to continue to win and they just kept doing it is depth, but the ability to coach that depth up. And so, yes, I do think the fact that they kept winning jaded people because we were like, oh, well, they've done it all year with like a ragtag crew because of injuries. Why not just do it again?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it distracted everybody. Like maybe it did some fans, maybe not so much others, but I do think there's proof of concept.
I feel like at the root of this question is like the Myles Garrett stuff, right? Like it's like, hey, we don't need more top end talent. We need depth to make sure that what happened this year doesn't happen again. Because in a normal year, this amount of injuries don't happen, but a good amount of injuries still does. And
right.
So like this team had its head still above water when they lost Marcus Davenport, when they lost Derek Barnes, when they lost Aiden Hutchinson. The defense was still playing at a really good level despite missing those three guys. Edge guys.
Which is crazy.
Really important guys. Even when they lost Alex Anzalone, like you had guys that can step in Malcolm Rodriguez and provide really good level of play. And that's a lot right there. And that's
when Aleem went down. That's when it started getting a little bit wonky.
Aleem and then Carlton and then Malcolm and then right. But like they had enough to withstand an average or above average amount of injuries this year to still have a good, well-balanced team both offensively and defensively. But they got a way above average injuries on the defensive side of the ball and it hurt. So I don't know if this question was asked to kind of like take a shot at people who want Malcolm or who want Myles Garrett. It feels like it a little bit because it pushes against the idea of like this team does not need a top end talent to push them over the top. They need to continue to have the depth that they had and just not hit the crappy injury luck that they hit this year.
Right.
And I think there are points to be made on both sides, but I do think there is validity to that point. I do think that the line, like you ask anybody going into the year, you thought the Lions had a talented enough squad to win the Super Bowl.
People still thought they had a talented enough squad after the injury.
Yes.
To win the Super like that.
Right.
That's how good they were.
Of course, the other side of this conversation that I think is a little more comfortable to have is that I think the Lions were actually pretty lucky when it came to injuries on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm not sure how lucky they'll be next year. Mm-hmm. And that to me could even be more detrimental because that's still the strength of your team, right? Listen, it's not like they didn't have any, right? The offensive line had a lot of different combinations that they played this year because almost everybody missed a game. Maybe everybody missed a game. Maybe Graham didn't.
I don't think Panay didn't miss a game.
Yeah, maybe not.
Graham missed one. Frank missed one. Decker missed one.
Yeah.
Zeitler missed one at the end. But
your skill position players were almost completely untouched outside of David Montgomery. And that was fortunate. So
you were also like Laporta was coming off an injury that
True.
really didn't. He was really
It took
late
him
to
about a
get,
month, really, to
maybe more.
look like himself.
Yeah, right.
But I guess the point being
But
is,
no,
like,
I agree with you.
I don't know if they have the depth on offense to withstand the injuries as much as they did on defense. So maybe that's something that they look at doing this year, whether it's adding another tight end that they like, or adding more offensive line depth, or receiver or two.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think the answer to the original question, was this team incredibly fortunate and talented to withstand all those injuries and finish 15-2? The answer is undoubtedly yes. Like, that was nothing short of a miracle, honestly. Like, it was very impressive. And I think it also speaks to not just coaching up the players, but coaching in game. Because in order to win a lot of those games, it required big plays and big moments, and winning those coin flip games and making the right decisions on fourth down and all those things. And they've become a really good one-score game team. And I know some analytical people will tell you that's not consistent year over year, and you might regress to the mean next year or the year after or whatever, but there is a level of skill to it. Yeah, tell Kansas City that, tell Minnesota that for the longest time. If you're a well-coached team, you make big plays in big moments.
I think a lot of that is mentality, though, the type of players they bring in, the focus that it's next man up, like all that stuff factors into it as well. The method that they have of roster building is sustainable.
Yeah. All right. 3 more here. Ed, Mr. Head 315 on Twitter, asked, in your estimation, which line's position group needs work or maybe a makeover during the offseason?
I don't know if anything needs a makeover, but there's certainly a lack of talent on the edge, and on the defensive end spot, and on the defensive interior.
Yeah,
you're going to need a wide receiver. You're going to need a guard. You're going to need a linebacker maybe to help round things out.
Corner.
But the one that most people aren't talking about is that there's only 3 corners. And so the corner is the one that you need depth at. And that may mean re-signing Kindle Vildor, which people will scoff at, but it's silly in my opinion, because he's fine as corner 5, right? Like, in that he can be reliable. Didn't have a bad season. He played in almost every single game. Like, people only talk about the games he started. Like, to be able to come off the bench cold and give you a rep and not be just awful is great. Now, as a starter, you don't want him as a starter, but you need guys that can just drop of a hat, go in, keep their mindset to be ready at all times. And the Vildor can do that. Dorsey could do that. So you're going to need more depth at corner.
Yeah.
So you're going to see I think a lot of the focus is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, and you need some spot guys here. You need maybe you want a more reliable OT3. Maybe you want a guard that can challenge the start. Maybe you need an X at receiver. Maybe you want a running back 4, so you bring back Craig, right? Or maybe you could just really solidify that group too. So
yeah,
I don't think there's a ton of work that needs to be done on offense, but on defense, 3 of the 4 main position groups all need depth.
Yeah. Corner is an interesting one, because theoretically you could just re-sign your guys and you're done, right? You re-sign Carlton, you re-sign Khalil Dorsey.
Then you just need a safety.
Right.
Right. Maybe one.
But the defensive line to me is one of those positions that might go maybe not complete overhaul, but significant overhaul, right?
Sure.
You
especially if you change it.
Right. If you don't re-sign Levi, if you don't re-sign Marcus Davenport, there's even a small chance that DJ Reader is a cap casualty. I don't expect it, but it's certainly possible given his age, and I would say he was kind of just okay last year. There's certainly a possibility that they don't continue with Zadarius Smith. I think there's a kind of high probability.
Yeah.
given his contract and given that he doesn't love contract negotiations based on his past. And so, I mean, you could theoretically, I wouldn't be surprised to see 3 or 4 of their like top 7 from last year gone.
Well, but that's the thing with the Edge, and like what's interesting to me and what I think is unpredictable is they're at a spot where they could go in a completely different direction, and they could be like, we want pure just speed edge rushers,
Sure.
and that's what we want. And
Bring back James Houston.
Aiden can do everything. Like they could implement a Tampa Bay style of front where you're like running with 2 down linemen and then everybody else stands up, and then you can like they could do that because you have your defensive line coach is familiar, right? So
yeah,
will they do that? I don't know, but Aiden can do everything. Like Aiden
Right.
can stand up, down, he can move. Aiden gives them that flexibility, and so if they were going to overhaul a spot, I think defensive end, there's an opportunity if they want to.
Yep. I lost a question here, or maybe I think I just copied and pasted one twice. So there's only one more question here, and that is from our good friend Jason Krolik, who asks, who plays more snaps next season for the Lions, Giovanni Manu or Broderick Martin?
Broderick. One, he's going into year 3. We just talked about that, right? Year 3 always presents itself, an opportunity. 2, I think defensive line has the most opportunities.
More rotation, yeah.
Yep, exactly. I expect Skipper to be re-signed because he's kind of carved himself out in that role of being that 6th offensive lineman. He's also become a cult hero, and I think people would freak out if he didn't get re-signed.
He had his own profile piece on ESPN. Which he was completely embarrassed by the way. Not that he didn't like it. He's not a guy that loves being in the spotlight.
No. Manu also has Colby Sorsdal in front of him, which again could be a 3rd-year bump. Like, and he has 2 easy starters. So like he could end up being OT5 again, whereas Broderick may be nose tackle 2 just going into camp. Now he could also be nose tackle 5, depending on who they re-sign, and he may have to work his way up. But I think opportunity is there for Broderick more than it is for Gio.
Yeah, there's no question. It's an interesting question though, because I'm with you. Like the logical answer is Broderick Martin. But I think the general feeling behind both picks couldn't be more imbalanced. I feel like people are still encouraged about Giovanni Manu. I feel like people have lost a ton of faith in Broderick Martin. And I'm not saying people are right or wrong in that assessment. The Lions certainly would have hoped, I think, to get Broderick Martin on the field more than they have thus far. And he had plenty of opportunities last year, right? We just talked about all the injuries and subpar play that included the defensive line, and Broderick Martin still didn't get out there. That's concerning.
Yep.
Giovanni Manu, we don't really know. We've heard behind the scenes stuff. Justin Rogers had a really good story where he talked to, I think, Stephen Oliver, the assistant offensive line coach, and some other people, and said it's night and day what he looked like in August versus now, which you would expect.
Well, it better be.
Right. You'd expect it to be night and day. Night and day does not necessarily even mean capable backup at this point, given where he was.
Right.
Right. So
he was terrible. And I'm sure he will tell you that too.
Yes.
But he was so raw. He was as raw as any NFL player I've seen. But you also look at his movement and look at his size, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
he could be something.
Right. And so I do think the trending arrow for Manu is up, while Broderick Martin is either straight or down. But I still think just the nature of how the game of football is being played, that Martin is probably still more likely to play more snaps next year.
Yeah, defensive line rotates, offensive line doesn't. Gio would have to. We either have to see him jump Dan Skipper or Dan Skipper not be re-signed. He'd also have to jump Colby, and then maybe he gets an opportunity as like an OL6, and then that would be his path to snaps, right?
Right.
Or if he's as good as they say he is, he shifts in the guard, and all of a sudden he's in the guard competition, and then that would be That would be crazy.
Let's slow down that.
But I'm certainly, yes, I'm
Yeah.
certainly looking at the fact that he was OT3 and getting beat by Edge 6. You know what I mean?
Right.
Last year in camp.
Right.
And it was just, it's when you watch Geo, though, it was all technique,
Yeah.
right? Like it wasn't lack of talent that or lack of athleticism. It was just you're not bending right,
Right.
or your foot placement wasn't right there, or your hand placement wasn't right there.
Right.
And he wasn't like
It's mental.
he was. It's just like just habit too. Like he
Yeah.
has to get into that muscle memory. Like
Right.
he has to get into that. I need to be in order to get to where I need to be, I have to be able to hit my mark, and my mark is different than what it was
Yes.
in college, right? And my hands need to be in different spots. And so for him, it's just a matter of repetition, and getting technique. And if he gets that, the athleticism is just off the charts, right?
Right.
So if he is making those strides, which you would anticipate, then yeah, he could climb up pretty quick. But we have no idea.
Right.
The last time we saw him, he was terrible. Like, I'm not saying I could have beat him off the edge, but
I'm
almost-
saying you couldn't have.
oh yeah, all right, me too. But there was a lot of guys on the field that found ways
could and
past
didn't.
him,
Yeah.
which really, yeah, and those guys aren't on the team anymore.
I would
And
say
so
maybe the only way I think that Giovanni Manu plays more snaps, and maybe the first indicator that maybe he has taken those steps, is if they don't re-sign Skipper.
if they don't re-sign Skipper, man, the hype train's going to start on Gio. It's gonna.
Yeah.
It's gonna because,
But like even
if they go,
even if they think he could be OT3, I still think you re-sign Dan Skipper just to have that competition.
yeah, and you want to appease his cult as well,
You think that's important to Brad Holmes?
dude. For a minimum salary deal.
I'm just gonna say it. Everyone thinks Ben Johnson took the Commanders game off. I think the reason they lost that game is because Lions fans wouldn't stop cheering every time Dan Skipper came in.
Blaming
Lions
the fans.
Yep. Lions, they need to get a 5 seed next year so that they don't get that doesn't happen when the offense is on the field. They're just loud the entire time.
No, please. No.
All right, we're gonna leave it there. Thanks again for everyone for hanging with us during the off season. We got a ton of content coming your way, both written and audio. And I'll throw the reminder out there again: if you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to Pride of Detroit Direct, our premium newsletter that comes into your mailbox at least once a week during the off season, 3 or 4 times a week during the season. Plenty of awesome content there. Just go to prideofdetroit.com/subscribe to get there. But for Erik, I'm Jeremy. Thank you all for listening. It's Chaos. Be kind.
Recording stopped.
We got you 2 minutes. 2-minute window to get you out of here. Skipper, the new assistant offensive line coach. I'm trying to think if Skipper would like that or not.
No.
I don't think so. But I'm not.
How old is he? That's I want to find out. I don't know how old he is.
31.
He will be 31 in training camp. Or no, in the preseason.
Okay. All right, Ice Cecil. Let's keep it PG here, sir. Silver Rush, thank you for the 21 months subscribed on Twitch. Appreciate y'all.
I haven't watched Lander Baron yet. I have a note that Barton. Sorry. Yeah, Barton. I have a note on my chart that he is a Mike Sam potential player, but that's the only note that I have. I don't recall anything much more than that. There was a period of time early in, I don't know, September, whatever, when I had time that I went through a lot of linebackers and looked for potential Sams and just made like little notes. He was on that list of potential Sams for me, but I haven't watched him yet.
There you go. Why haven't you watched everyone yet? What are you doing?
Right.
All right. I think
Yeah, we're gonna see. Look. I have no idea how this whole front's gonna go, man.
yeah.
I'm very interested to see.
Also, I can't find anything about that Pistons trade. So I'm reading a tweet right now. It says, I'm told there's a chance KJ Martin ends up being rerouted from Detroit before the dust settles. Pistons are working multiple angles on the trade deadline front. But for now, they've landed a 24-year-old wing shooting 38% from three this season. Jay Higgins from Iowa. Any comments?
No.
Okay.
Not yet. I'm still going, man. I'm still learning.
All right. We'll close things up there for now. When will we be back next? Mensim, Saturday, Super Bowl. Before we go, I have a quick question for you guys, because traditionally I've done an on paper for the Super Bowl. I didn't do it last year because I think I was too distraught about the NFC Championship game. Does anyone have interest in an on paper Super Bowl, or is that wasting my time? Because I don't want to waste my time for something that no one's going to read. Okay, everyone's saying no. Waste. Okay, that's all I needed to hear. I won't do one.
No, it's not worth your time, man. Maybe if you published it at Chiefs Kingdom or whatever they call it.
Right. Well, there's obviously
Pride.
more national appeal, but I don't know how many people are coming to Pride of Detroit for. I mean, I could try to play the SEO game and get into that, but how many Super Bowl preview things are getting written this week?
You could publish it at the mothership.
Could try, but I don't get any extra pay for that, so no, thank you. All right. If you're on Twitch, we're gonna go raid our good friend Beard Blevins, because it's very rare that we're on at the same time. He is. If you're on YouTube, we're just gonna end stream in a second here. Yeah. So if you want, we'll do the Madden Sim. If you don't want to watch the Super Bowl, but you want to hang out and watch a Super Bowl-esque thing while just talking about Lions the entire time, come to our Madden Sim Saturday morning. It'll probably be around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. We'll run a Chiefs Eagles Madden Sim, but mostly just be hanging out and doing whatever. It'll be a good time. Other than that, we'll be live probably next after that with the main POD cast Monday night. And then midweek mailbag will be back probably on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning again.
I would think so.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thanks for all the questions, and we'll see you guys soon. Okay, Twitch is gone. Let me just make sure
right.
YouTube is still here for a second. We'll just make sure that raid goes through, and then we'll do our proper goodbyes.
Are there
Okay, I think it went through. Okay.